Hello. Hey,
What
Lovett.
up? Hey, Tommy.
Want to do some Q's and
It's
some
time.
A's?
Yeah, let's. One of my favorite jokes from a little program called 1600 Pen, which was canceled after one season, was the president's son saying, "Is there a Q&A? Because boy, have I got a Q for your A." It's a good joke. This is the Pod Save America live stream. If you're just joining us,
We got Elisa on the ones and twos. Elijah, as always, controlling the feed. Let's do some Q's.
let's go.
Okay. Seems like there should be something to prevent a president from holding the country hostage by shutting it down. When Democrats are back in power, is there anything they can do to prevent a situation like this from happening in the future?
Great question.
Great question.
You know, there was an episode of a podcast I listen to from time to time called The Weeds. In which they were discussing the fact that what makes this shutdown in some ways unique is the fact that this is a president-directed shutdown. It's usually been Congress that's been refusing some priority, and or infighting inside of Congress that's caused shutdowns. But this is one directed by the president. Don't take my word for it. You can listen to him. You know, I think one of the things we'll grapple with after Trump is gone is what do we do about the weaknesses he exposed, because so much of what so much sort of smoothness in Washington depended on presidents who felt shame or some kind of, regard for their fellow human beings, and figuring out how to rein in presidents after this is over is a really important thing, as will be, I think, figuring out how to detoxify the Republican Party by defeating them in elections so that we can get back to kind of regular governing where there's actual hearings about important budget issues and we're not governing. I mean, even if the government reopens, it will be reopened because we are past a CR, which is called a continuing resolution, which is basically saying we couldn't hammer out debates over government funding and spending, and we couldn't figure out how to actually think about our priorities in a long-term way. So whatever the budget was 6 months ago, that's the budget for the next 6 months. And it actually covers up a lot of problems inside of government agencies that are never covered on television, not discussed, barely mentioned in the congressional debate. But even when things are working the way they're supposed to be working, they're not working.
Yeah. Also, I think that back pre-Jimmy Carter, it was sort of assumed that appropriations would just carry over, so these shutdowns wouldn't occur. And then Carter's counsel, I was Googling this while you're talking to make sure I remember it right, basically said that when there's a lapsed appropriation, no money can be spent to do the agency's function. So that's just a long way of saying we created this problem relatively recently. Like Jimmy Carter's legal team created this problem of government shutdowns, and like we couldn't fix it. We just have to bring some common sense and be reasonable for a minute. I hopefully no one watching this fucking disaster thinks that this is a good idea or solving any problem or something to emulate in the future.
I mean, basically, the ability to shut the government down, as well as the debt limit, which is when the government needs to borrow more money because we're always in debt and can't because there's an artificially set cap on how much money the U.S. government can borrow. And if we ever hit that cap, it means we can't borrow more money to pay our bills. Both of those things are like a gun on the mantle. And, when there's the Chekhov thing.
Chekhov?
When there's a gun on the mantle in the first act, someone's getting shot in the third act. So we need to get the guns off the fucking mantle.
Agreed.
Same. How do you guys think guys like Ryan and Rubio will talk about all of this in 10 years? They'll say, sure, we know he was bad, but we needed him and he did good stuff. Or will they still be defending him? How will they write their books, defend themselves?
Those people will write their little tell-all books about all the times they tried to talk President Trump out of doing something way worse that you never knew about, how they were heroes who saved the day. Paul Ryan has already started his revisionist history bullshit in all those interviews with Mark Leibovich at the New York Times about all the things he did to prevent chaos, yada, yada, yada. They are the worst. They will probably still be in Washington. Rubio may be a senator. I'm sure Ryan will be a lobbyist or running AEI or some fucking think tank. And that city will still treat them with respect and deference and give them money because we never learned the lessons of disastrous failures. Look at all the people that instigated the Iraq War. They're sitting in the White House.
Financial crisis.
Faith. Yeah, it's infuriating.
Yeah, I think they're going to diverge. I think they're going to have to tell two different stories. I think Rubio is going to have an easier time of it. I mean, I don't like it, but I think we should just be honest about it. I think Ryan is going to be unable to successfully tell a story that doesn't paint him in a terrible light. I think he's going to try. I think he's already trying. But it's very hard to look at his tenure and not come away in a bipartisan way with disgust. I mean, even Kevin McCarthy, in rebuking Steve King, did not mind taking a shot at Paul Ryan. And I think Paul Ryan is going to be vilified and have a very dark place in history, and he will have some dead-ender defenders, but he's going to have a rough time of it. Here's my prediction on Rubio. I think Rubio is trying to set himself up to say, I am a ship, a steady ship in stormy seas. I've been Marco Rubio this whole time, and I was myself when I was on stage with Donald Trump trying to defeat him. I picked my fights with him, but supported him when he got behind conservative causes in the Senate, and I'm here to rebuild the Republican Party when he's gone. And what he will also do is sort of skip over the places in which he capitulated or stepped out of fights, because what he'll do is point to a set of fights he did have while being able to successfully not talk about the fact, if he is successful, in not talking about all the important battles he sat out of. And I think it's our job to be very clear after Trump is gone that it's not about the little tiny fights you picked, it's all the fights you let go by.
The fights he made along the way. And Marco will, if Trump loses re-election, I bet Marco runs next cycle. I don't know that Ryan will. Maybe, who knows? They're all delusional, but Marco, anyway.
Do you think Dems caving early during the shutdown last year is part of the reason why this shutdown is happening, that they're counting on Dems' empathy to make them cave again?
I do not think that these two things are related.
No.
I think that Donald Trump caused this shutdown. It's entirely his decision. He could end it anytime he wanted. He could fight for wall funding. I mean, I think that this shutdown occurred because Ann Coulter was mean to Trump and a bunch of conservatives were mean to him, and I think that he's basically told us as much.
Yeah, the last shutdown where Democrats walked away over DACA is, I think, instructive. I think that there wasn't a full kind of sense of like, well, all right, if we do this, what is a realistic plan to get out of it while getting something that we want? And it's an interesting thing. I think the one lesson there is that's what Trump has now done, right? With many fewer paths to success and a much longer shutdown and much less support and a much worse hand. The one lesson I think for Democrats right now is they cannot give in. They just can't. There's now too much on the line. And I think the good news is you see some sort of criticism around the margins and calls for Pelosi to promise votes and whatnot, which, again, I think is actually not so bad. But in the core idea that Democrats should not allow Donald Trump to shut the government down over a picayune and pretty stupid and evil policy priority, I think there's been unity, and that's very important.
For a question on 2020, are you worried so many lesser-known Dems, i.e. Buttigieg and Castro, running for president instead of important state or Senate races, which they could be great candidates for, and be major pickups for the party, is that bad for overall everything?
I mean, it would be naive to say that taking great candidates away from state races isn't harmful.
Yeah.
Right. So, I'm not ready to point any fingers at anybody because it's so early. Like, I think if you want to run for president, you have something interesting to say, go for it. There will be a process to winnow out that list. Hopefully that winnowing process doesn't take too long and doesn't get super ugly. I think if there's lower tier candidates damaging the eventual nominee, that's something that you might worry about, but that's very much a down the road problem. In the meantime, if you're going to run for president, we need to know why you specifically are running, because you and we were literally just talking about this in our office, John and me, because this is what we do. It is one of the single most arrogant acts in the world to say, I am the person who is best prepared to lead the country, and so you need to explain us that thinking.
Yeah, and it's an extraordinary and arrogant decision in any time, but right now, the stakes are total. These are total stakes. Even when Hillary Clinton was facing off against Bernie Sanders, when we didn't know that Donald Trump was going to be the nominee, these stakes were just genuinely not as high. They were not. And now the future of the United States depends on the Democratic Party successfully choosing the right nominee. I don't know who that is. I don't know how we're going to do that. It's a hard problem. It's a hard process. We're all doing it with imperfect information, all with a lot of, I mean, let's be honest, a lot of anxiety and uncertainty because of how wrong we got it last time in terms of believing we would win and then waking up to find out we hadn't. So I think to Tommy's point, it's not just getting in because you believe you'd be the best president, but really, it's important that every person who decides they're going to run for president for the Democratic nomination approach it with the seriousness and consequence that it holds. It is among the most. This is about to be the most important decision we make as a party, maybe in the history of the United States. And I don't even think I don't think that's fully coming through yet. I don't think we're all really cognizant of just how hard this is going to be and how much pain there's going to be and how much anxiety and anger and emotion that will go into this decision. It's just what's coming. And anyone who's getting into this race should be thinking very hard about that. That's all.
Will you be redoing the Vote Save America page for the primaries? In general, it was extremely helpful in finding places to volunteer and canvass.
We're working on Vote Save America 2.0.
Yeah.
Don't know what it's going to look like yet. But honestly, it was the best thing we've ever done as a company.
Yeah.
We think.
I think I would say if like Vote Save America, it could tell you where your polling place was. It can make sure you were registered, tell you how to register. It gave you information about your ballot, and it gave you information about where you can volunteer. I think we'd all be open to what other things you think would be helpful for Vote Save America to have. If there are things that you thought were missing, or when you were sharing it with your friends that would give them that one more piece of information to get them to vote, tell us. Because I think sky's the limit in terms of what we're open to for figuring out what Vote Save America can do to make it this kind of one-stop shop to help people get involved.
What norms that have been violated by this administration should be protected by laws that can be passed to ensure these violations don't happen again in the future?
Release your taxes. That'd be an easy law.
Yeah.
Got to release your tax returns when you're running for president. What other norms?
I would say, so
DOJ interactions.
Yes, we need to think about how to strengthen the special counsel. I think there was a legitimate fear of the power of the independent counsel after the Clinton investigations, and that was allowed to expire and was replaced by a set of guidelines that I'm not a lawyer. I got a great LSAT score, but I'm not a lawyer. But that have now become the special counsel, and I think there'll be a lot of questions there was a great Mike Barbaro interview with one of the people responsible for those guidelines for the special counsel, and basically Donald Trump is the worst case scenario for those guidelines. And what's fascinating is here we are. There's still a special counsel. They're still holding up. We don't know if we're going to see the report. We don't know what's going on inside the Justice Department, but thinking about how to strengthen those, I think, is really important. The other thing I would say is Donald Trump has done it or has threatened to use his national security powers that is, from Article 2 of the Constitution, and then also that are now enshrined in a lot of laws that say, Congress can stop the president from doing X, Y, or Z unless the president deems it a national security emergency. I think we should think very hard about reining in the presidential prerogatives on laws like that. I think one of the lessons Republicans point to Barack Obama's DACA decision as being extra legal and replacing the job of Congress. There are a lot of people that have been trying to use that example to say that's why Donald Trump can then build a wall. I think they're full of shit. But we need to think really hard about when we have allowed, by the fact that Congress is so poorly run and so partisan, to allow more and more of congressional responsibilities to devolve to the president, and we need to take them back.
Take them back. Yeah, I think generally, like interactions with the DOJ, there's supposed to be a pretty bright line about who can interact with DOJ and what the president can do in terms of investigations, and a lot of that flows from the fact that Nixon would get drunk and call his attorney general and complain about Watergate. Maybe we need to do more to codify that.
Yeah.
There is an ongoing problem that we've talked about many times about the total abdication of its responsibility by Congress in terms of matters of war and peace. It would be good to see them right-size that. So.
Yeah. Oh, so one more thing too. Over the years, the White House itself has gotten very big. The National Security Council has become kind of a mirror of a lot of what goes on at the State Department. I think that there's good reasons to look at the way our government is currently structured and say, would things be better if more power was taken from the president and put in the hands of cabinet secretaries, of agencies, of Congress, of states. And I think that's actually, of all the places, there is possibility for like some kind of bipartisan movement on something like that. Although I can imagine conservatives trying to sneak in. And then Medicare's a block grant. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. You know?
Pet issue or policy to be addressed in primary, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, job training, etc.
I want someone. Foreign policy will not be what wins this election, nor will it be the focus. I'd love to hear just like a new, interesting, well-articulated vision for how the United States should view the world. And maybe that will be very simple, like restoring alliances, blah, 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 respect for institutions, fine. But it would be great to hear someone go out and make that case, because Trump is not going to get a single thing through Nancy Pelosi's Congress in the next few years, but he can do a lot of damaging shit on foreign policy. So making that argument now about how you'd be different will be interesting and important to me.
I'll add to that. I don't think we can call like climate change a pet issue.
Yeah.
So, like, that's like being like, my hobby is staying alive. But I would say here is a classic pet issue.
Yes.
Daylight savings time is fucking stupid.
Oh, that's a good one.
And it's time for it to go. And I say that as someone, now there's two things people say, but it's so dark in the morning. I say that as someone who has, since he's given up the craft of writing because it's the old economy, become a morning person.
You are.
I'm a morning person now. I see this person at the gym in the morning.
There have been several times I've been walking to the gym and Lovett has just scootered by me.
Yeah. I'll scooter right by him. I'll scooter right by Tommy on my way to the gym. So I get up and it's dark, but it's worth it. It's worth it for those nice evening lights. So when I say get rid of daylight savings time, I'm saying we go into daylight savings one last time, and then that is just called time. That is time on Earth.
When it's dark at 5,
States.
it's so depressing.
Who wants it to be dark at 5? And then now parents will say, but the kids have to go to school in the dark. Guess what? All right? Section 2 of my bill. No child goes to school before 8 in the fucking morning. What kind of rules are these? I got a high school by my house. I got kids in that Starbucks at 7:15 in the fucking morning. Get out of that Starbucks.
Flashlights
Get out
for
of
all.
there. By the way, they're just selling milkshakes anyway. Starbucks is just a milkshake delivery thing for children. Going to school in the fucking dark. And I'm glad those teachers got a raise.
Me too. Congrats to the teachers.
Yeah.
6% pay increase, smaller class size. Like seems like they got someone where they want.
And a nurse in every school.
That's cool.
All right? Because
LA teachers.
sometimes kids need to pretend they have a stomach ache because they don't have anyone to sit with.
What else you got, Elisa?
Any thoughts on the MAGA hack kids and their PR management?
Oh my God.
I bolded this one. I made us do this.
Do you want to? So I was off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, which meant I had a lot of free time. I was trying to read books and try to be off Twitter, but then I would log on.
They didn't seem very off Twitter to me.
Yeah, I didn't do a great job. Sometimes you get bored of your book. Sometimes you read.
That was a close one.
No, not bored of my wife. No, my wife, we had a blast. But no, sometimes you steal The Office's free copy of Presidents at War by Michael Beschloss, and it's genuinely good. And I didn't know anything about the War of 1812, and now I know a lot.
Oh, good.
But 300 pages later, you realize, what's happening in my, my short twitch
your
fiber
endorphin
muscle
box.
brain. Yeah, exactly. So I log in, and it was a classic Twitter issue where I don't want to weigh in on what happened because I don't know, but it seems like nobody knew that wasn't there, but people were offering very strong opinions. And you're seeing like random Hollywood producers weighing in, destroying the kids. You're seeing all the like worst Charlie Kirk, like the MAGA awful people blasting the other side. And it was just one of those controversies where it felt like everyone needed to have a take. And I just wondered why a lot of people were diving so strongly into it. I respect anyone who was offended or hurt by what happened. Everyone's allowed to have a point of view, but it was just an incident to me that said a lot more about Twitter and the way people interact with each other online than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, I think it's hard because you see something like that happening and you say to yourself, I don't really want to understand it. There's a compulsion on Twitter to make you feel like you should understand it. You also want to say, I'm cool with everyone else's opinions. I don't want to have one. But then even saying that, like, everyone doesn't need to have an opinion. People tweet that. That is an opinion. Mm-hmm. That is a form of having an opinion. And And so it's this strange thing of Twitter is a party that everyone's invited to and everyone's expected to attend, and no one's had a good time on it in quite some time. But if you miss it, you feel bad. The other piece of it, too, is what I was thinking about when I saw the video is, so this is going to be a little, let's call it pedantic. But by definition, the internet is a place where you argue about symbols because the internet isn't the real world. It's a representation of the real world. And so on Twitter, we spend all day arguing about representations. How does this tweet represent someone else's argument? How does this online imitation of interaction approximate real interaction in the world? But then it goes another step, which is, how does this thing that I got a video of from the real world represent the real world? How does this clip of this boy in front of this man represent the world? And everyone on Twitter has an interest in saying, this video represents my understanding of the world and captures something essential about the people I deem as being wrong, as being racist, as being outside of the norms that I believe we should uphold. And that's fine. Like, that can be true. It can be false. But when you spend all day arguing about representations of the real world, I think it's a dangerous, it's okay in small amounts, but it becomes really dangerous when all day everyone is arguing about symbols. What does this mean? It's not that what that kid did to that. No one says, I am upset because what that kid did to that man made that man feel uncomfortable, and I am mad because of one specific incidence of harm. It is that boy represents a movement, and that man represents another movement, and that boy speaks for a movement, and I have a problem with that movement. We're talking about this larger movement.
I'm going to fold in all these other things.
And sometimes the folding in is right. In this case, there was an argument as to whether it was right, and then it was a backlash, and then a backlash, who cares? But the point is, everyone's spending all day saying, see, this is who they really are. This symbol tells you who these people really are. This representation is the accurate one. And that's not the world. So when you see a reporter say, maybe one answer to this is everyone should volunteer. The kids should have to go do a volunteer service project. People are like, no, those kids should be taught something different. It's not about service. It's not about the world. It's about this moment and what it represents. So that's all. I don't know what the answer is.
I don't either.
But I think one of the answers is to remember that Twitter is a party that you can leave whenever you want. And you can go home and get a good night's sleep, and nothing on Twitter, nothing good at a party, and nothing good on Twitter has ever happened after midnight.
Or yeah, and look, I logged in, I watched the video, and I was like, oh man, those kids looked like they were being just assholes. And then I read a little more about Mr. Phillips, and I was like, oh, what an interesting story, Vietnam better, right? I guess the thing that was in the back of my mind, though, is that every time there's a major incident like that, 24 hours, there's a different understanding for it. Without fail, the first snapshot of the accounting of a complicated news event like that turns out to have a lot of things wrong. And it's just a lesson we don't learn over and over and over again, whether it's like a shooting or an act of violence. Like, it's infuriating. And it's a lot of journalists who it's like their job to know better than to dive on these things.
Now, the other argument, right, is that, like, if let's say forget this one incident, but let's say we're talking about a circumstance where a group of teens who have imbibed a culture that has, from Trump on down, that has said it's okay to be hateful, it's okay to give into that little vice inside of you that says pick on somebody, don't sympathize with somebody, don't empathize with people that are different from you. They've imbibed that, they've gone to DC, and they're taking it out for a spin. Like, that is a serious problem. That is something worth talking about. And so there is like this. That's what makes, I think, this case so hard, because it's like, well, this isn't really a distraction. Like, kids are learning from their adults. Kids are learning from Donald Trump. Donald Trump is teaching adults and kids alike how to behave, and that's really dangerous. It's just, I think the problem is when people try to take an individual and let them stand in for a movement, it can never, by definition, succeed.
Especially when you've never met this. It's a 16-year-old kid who just looks like he's being a jerk on television, right? It's like kids. We probably exhausted.
I know.
I know. It's just one of these so frustrating. It's like high school boys have been assholes forever. Maybe these ones were even worse because they were inspired by Trump. They were there because of this rally. There's videos of them being jerks to other young women who were there. I don't know the answer, and I think maybe that's just the point.
Well, I think one thing that is clearly not the answer is then taking what is ultimately a small single moment and raising the stakes of it totally, so that this boy is now on the Today Show. And I don't begrudge someone for Savannah for interviewing someone who's clearly in the news. It's all of us together deciding what's in the news. Like, we decide to take these two. It's like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like we see a clip, it seems to represent something, and then by the conversation that follows, it becomes true. And now they do stand in for that really important debate that we're having. But the one thing it doesn't do is help us fix it, because you know what's not going to convince a teenage boy that he was wrong? Turning into a global enemy. You know, it's like,
or a celebrity on the right.
Or a celebrity on the right who's now going to be celebrated, and Trump sees this, and it's candy to him, because anything like this that can make America a place where brown people are arguing with white people, or conservatives are pitched against activists and Muslims and Native Americans, is a conversation that he wants, but it's not the one that we want. I don't know. What a shit show.
we want blanket condemnations over here.
There's a call for
the nuance you brought to that.
Elisa has marched out of the office. She has come back in. Now she is demanding. I don't know what she's demanding. Nothing. She's demanding fealty. Do you have another question or what?
Yes. Tommy sort of touched on this. There seems to be consensus around a few big domestic policy proposals among 2020 Democrats. But what do you want to hear from them regarding foreign policy?
I mean, a bigger vision, like I sort of mentioned. I assume all of them will say we should get completely out of Afghanistan. I think that'll be important. They're all going to need to figure out what they're going to do in Iraq and Syria. I'd like to see more complicated, nuanced views of the Middle East peace process. I'd like to see them talking about the need to end a completely self-destructive, stupid trade war with China, and actually think of a policy process that manages the next couple decades of challenges we have with them. So those are a few things.
Can someone explain what's going on in Venezuela and if Trump is doing the right thing or not?
Sure.
I got it.
So this has been rolling all day. So President Maduro just said that all U.S. diplomats have 72 hours to get the fuck out. That came in response to Mike Pence putting out a video where he recognized an opposition leader. What's the guy's name? Juan Guaido, who's like 35-year-old young leader in the National Assembly. They recognized him as the president. He had asked international organizations and foreign countries to do so. Guaido did. So Pence put out this video recognizing him. Trump put out a statement. A bunch of the OAS has followed. Mexico, Brazil, a bunch of other countries are following. So there seems to be a coup happening in Venezuela, which is not, stepping back and just observing it would be a good thing. Maduro has been a disaster since he took over in 2013. People have no medicine, no food. They're starving to death. It's like the most dire situation ever. It was disconcerting to me to see the U.S. jump into this and start announcing who we believe the president is without any sort of democratic process. And then saying all options are on the table, including the military. There's not a military solution, I don't think, to the problem in Venezuela that we should put forward. So it's dicey and it's ongoing. I mean, they do need new leadership. The people are suffering horribly, but it's happening today.
Equally important, Lovett, where did the Connecticut pizza you approved of come from?
Oh, yeah. Where did you get that?
Where did I go? It was Pepe's.
Oh.
It was Pepe's. I went to a Pepe's in Danbury, Connecticut, and it was very good. I had a white clam pie, and I had a, more tomato sauce, red, normal pizza with some toppings. It was fantastic. I went there with a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist to document it, and he was there to demonstrate that it did take place and that the pizza was excellent.
As we get closer to next Sunday, will Tommy and Jon become more unbearable as a result of the Patriots competing in the Super Bowl?
When something is at 100%, you can't necessarily get more unbearable. So we will be the same amount of unbearable, maximum unbearable, because we are the best football team in the history of the NFL.
I went to a barbecue restaurant with the very same Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and we were sitting at a table. So we walked in and it was early, but it was crowded, and the TVs were on and they were loud. And I look up and I realized it said there was 4 minutes left, and I gathered that it was an important football game because in my mind I was like, oh, the Super Bowl is coming up. I know that because I tried to plan a board game day on Super Bowl, and I know when that was. And I was like, oh, it must be one of those games that leads up to the Super Bowl. And it said 4 minutes left, and Ronan was like, it is so loud in here. And I was like, but don't worry, there's only 4 minutes left. And so we sit down at the table. It's incredibly loud. He's like, he's got questions. I don't have answers. But, I quickly deduced that it was the New England Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs in a fight for a slot in the Super Bowl. I don't know if they are the AFC or the NFC. Which is it?
Patriots? AFC.
It was the AFC Championship. And there were 4 minutes left. And that 4 minutes dragged for what? 40 minutes?
Yeah.
40 minutes of the last. Now, I knew it would be more than 4 minutes, but holy shit. And then we're watching this thing unfold, and it's the blind leading the blind. And Ronan's asking me questions, and I don't know what the rules are. But all of a sudden, I look up, and I see that there's, 30 seconds left, and that the Patriots are down 28-31, I believe, or 24-27, whatever it was. And I realized that they're in range of a field goal. And I had to tell Ronan, I said, Ronan, I have some really bad news. I know I said this game was about to be over, but if the Patriots make this kick, the game isn't over. They're going to have to keep playing. And Ronan just said, so what does that mean? I said, well, it means that there's overtime. And he goes so do they go home and pick it up another day? And then I said, no, they finish it tonight. They finish the game tonight. End of story. Maybe end of live stream.
Yeah. Those are the questions.
Go Rams.
Go Rams.
How dare you?
Go Rams. The LA Rams?
The LA
I know it is. Go Rams. Rooting for those Patriots. Ronan was so funny. At the final stage, he was like, well, they're great and they cheat. Great combination. They're really good at the game and they also cheat.
They do not cheat.
Not anymore. They've been... No. Fool us. How many more strikes do they get in football?
Bulls 3 times.
What?
Bulls thrice.
I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what this is for. I hope it's not a racist symbol.
God.
End of live stream.